Hello YouTube folks, welcome to my channel. My name is Steph and today I'm going to be recommending books to challenge you. Last week I did a video on books to help you get out of a reading slump, so these were like easy, juicy, short book recommendations to get you, back into the reading grind. And today I'm doing the opposite. Books that you kind of have to take your time to read because either they're just long because the concepts are a little bit difficult to swallow from like a humanity perspective, or maybe they're just kind of complex stories. They're like out of order or confusing worlds, whatever it may be. These are books that I enjoy, that I recommend, but that are quite a challenge for various reasons. The first book I want to recommend, and this is probably her most controversial book. I haven't read the new book that just came out a few weeks ago, but I'm recommending Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I loved this book. I also loved Hellbent in a very different way than how I loved the stuff from the Grishaverse like Shadow and Bone and Six of Crows. This is Leigh Bardugo's adult debut, and it's very different from that sort of like typical fantasy main character special girl who saves the world type of story. This I'm recommending as a challenge book because if you're a fan of Leigh Bardugo, it's different, so that kind of makes it a hard pill to swallow. It also covers some really difficult topics. I know a lot of people struggled with this book because they felt like it was like trauma dumpy, like it was like everything bad that could happen to a human being happened to this main character, so she was like complex because of all that. I don't know if I necessarily agree because having grown up poor, having grown up with a lot of like familial structural problems, the main character's life didn't seem that out of pocket. It didn't seem that far-fetched. I have seen girls who have grown up the way Alex Stern, the main character in this book, grew up. I recommend this book. It's really good. Also, the plot and the world is a little confusing because it takes place at Yale. So it's giving, a very high status intellectual type of navigation of worlds. Everything's organized in very weird ways, and the fantasy magic system is kind of different from anything I think I've ever read. Not different as in like I've never seen it before, but different in its presentation and its exploration. But it's good. It's long too. I think it's like 500 pages. It's like 450 pages. It's about this girl, has a rough past. She gets in this really extreme accident where she loses a lot of people she knows, is the only survivor, wakes up in the hospital, and a representative from Yale is there, and they're like, you need to come to the school. We know that you have this special gift that we want to use in our secret society of magic doing and demon slaying. So she goes to Yale, and she meets an interesting cast of characters. She takes you on a journey. There's multiple issues in this woman's life that she's like trying to solve at the same time. So like the stuff she's doing for Yale, her past coming back to haunt her, getting good grades. Her friend goes through something extreme, so she's helping her with that. So there's just a lot juggling in this book. It's a difficult read, but I really liked it. And if you can get through Ninth House, Hellbent is so good. That ending. Oh, I can't wait for the third book. Leigh Bardugo, get it going. The next book I want to recommend, my cover has like a weird, it almost looks like a burn hole in it. I don't know. The next book I want to recommend is a book everybody knows and is very famous, but it's becoming on the older side. It's becoming like a modern classic, so I don't know how well known it is. Obviously, there's a TV series about it that is loosely based off of this book, but that is Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. Very difficult read, very realistic dystopian novel. People, activists dress up in the classic like white hood, red gown outfit that the handmaids wear in this book when protesting for like abortion rights and that kind of stuff. It's a bit of a hard pill to swallow, y'all. It's a bit difficult. I read it way too young. I think I was like in middle school when I picked this up because I don't know why. It looked cool and I was in a dystopian phase thanks to Hunger Games. So I was like, hell yeah, I'm going to read Handmaid's Tale. This is a difficult book to read. If you don't know what it's about this futuristic world where there's some sort of disease or virus or something. Most women can no longer reproduce. So women who can are basically forced to be slaves, and in addition to being used for reproduction by husbands and wives who then take their babies as their own babies, they also are like cooking and cleaning and like completely in servitude. They're not allowed to like look at men. It's like super cruel lifestyle that these women are forced into. But it's a beautiful read. The ending is different than what happens in the series. So if you liked the series but you're looking for something else, a little bit of a different journey, I would recommend this book. And also it's the original tale. Handmaid's Tale. When I talked about this in my last video, I hate when they put stickers on the cover of books. And when you take them off, it like rips the... whatever, it's fine. Don't look at the Walmart sticker. I didn't get this from Walmart. I got it from Thrift Books. They got it from Walmart. Okay. The next book I'm recommending for challenging stories is Iron Widow by Xran J. Zhao. I really hope I said your name right. I'm so sorry. I'm recommending this book not because it's a difficult read necessarily, but because it's one of the first books that I've read that does that thing that anime does really well, where it's like fantasy, sci-fi, dystopian, and historical, like all kind of in one. Like wrapping your brain around this is kind of a challenge because you can't like, it's really hard to put this in a genre. It's fantasy because people have magic. It's sci-fi because people like wear metal animal suits that they can control and like fight each other with. And there's aliens and stuff. It's historical because it takes place in like ancient China like time. Like it's people, you know, the women wear those like bound feet. You wear those gowns with the wrap, you know what I'm saying? I don't have the terminology for it. I'm really sorry for being ignorant about that, but you know what I mean? Like it has a lot of historical implications, but it's also dystopian because there's like robot magic stuff, you know what I'm saying? Like it takes place in a different version of what the past could have been had the even further past been different. So it's all of those things in one. And it's a great read. I know there's a lot of drama with this author and her second book, Heavenly Tyrant, coming out. I really hope she's able to publish that. She's having issues with her publishing agency or something like that. It's been very dramatic and I feel really bad. So I really want to hype this book up. Iron Widow, it's super good. Polyamory, bad bitch, main character. She slays, y'all. This main character slays. It also, you know, has authentic Chinese, like, stuff in it. It's just really good. It's just a really beautiful story. Disabled representation, and like it's basically just this kind of like standard plot line of girl finding out she's special, getting taken in by royalty, but she grew up poor, so like she doesn't have the taste for royalty, and so she tears it apart. But set in a completely different universe, a completely different like world than what you typically see that in. So I would recommend this. The challenge lies in definition, in defining it, but it's such a good read. Iron Widow. The next book I want to recommend is a classic. Yes, I'm doing classics. I'm not doing any nonfiction. I'm only doing fiction, but this is a classic, and it's a hard read, probably for reasons you can guess, and that is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I love this cover. This is a challenging read because you are in the perspective of a woman who is a psycho. She's a psychopath, right? To kind of put it plainly. She's got really bad suicidal tendencies. She's really racist. She's really cruel. She has like weird opinions and perspectives of men. It's almost like that movie Pearl. If you've seen that movie, such a good movie. Whole franchise so good. New movies coming out soon. Anyway, but it's just like from this perspective that typically is perceived in fictitious tales versus like the perceiver. And it's just really exciting. Again, huge trigger warnings for all of the issues that this book talks about. Trigger warnings across the board, because part of reading challenging books is reading things that challenge you, like, morally. But this book is really good. It's about this girl who is in, like, fashion school or something, and she kind of has a psychotic break, ends up in an asylum, and, like, just kind of sees the world very strangely. She has some really interesting resolutions for her issues that, like, a person who isn't psychotic wouldn't think. Not that they're, like, wrong, right? Because there's really no true right or wrong to how people should be thinking. But it's a really interesting book, and you really have to set aside your, like, modern perspective, your modern neurotypical whatever perspective, because then the whole time you're reading this, you're going to just be like, what is this girl doing? When instead you have to challenge yourself to be like, this girl is different from me. I need to continue on this journey with her so I can see her different perspective that is pretty unique and that you don't see every day. Bell jar. The next book I want to recommend, which I do not have a copy of because I just read it this year, and that is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. I didn't realize how controversial this book was until I read it for a book club, and my book club had a discussion about it. Night Circus is pretty universally loved. Erin Morgenstern's other huge fiction novel. I never picked up Starless Sea, honestly. Don't hate me for this, but because I thought it was like a pirate story. And I don't love, like, on the sea stories, pirate stories. To be honest with you, there's very few exceptions. Like, To Kill a Kingdom is a really good one. But it's totally not that. It's totally not. Classic Erin Morgenstern style. It's a story about stories, very aloof, loose magic system that's literally never explained to you and never sensical. This book is probably one of the biggest challenge books on my recommend list today, and also that I've ever read that I didn't put down. I struggled so much the first chunk of this book, and then I said to myself, Steph, set your ego aside. Everything you know about literature, everything you've ever thought, all your preconceived notions about how books should be, push it out of your brain and just digest this book. And that made my experience very enjoyable. It definitely improved my reading journey. I really wanted to get this book down because of my book club, right? So I could, like, be included in the conversation. But I'm so glad I pushed through. It ends still not making sense. So do not think this is, like, one of those books that the puzzle pieces come together in the end, because they don't. They don't. They really don't, because Erin Morgenstern basically defies every writing style in her writing of this book. She really does. She took on a huge challenge, and I don't know if she succeeded, but she definitely came out with an interesting product. How do I even explain what it's about? It's about this guy who's in college, and he reads, like, fiction books from his college library to, like, get his mind off of school. He reads this book, and in the book is a story, literally, that is his life as a child. Like, something happens in the book that is so unique to his experience that happened to him when he was a kid. So he was like, oh my god, I'm in this book. That's crazy. So he, like, does all this crazy research. He's, like, a media major, so he's, like, good with social media and, like, technology and stuff. And he does all this research to try to find where this book's from, who wrote it, because none of that information is in the library database or in the book. He figures it out, goes to this party, and gets sucked into this, like, secret book society that, oh man, that is, they're not, like, trying to control, but they're also not, like, a part of, it's just a society that's aware. That's what I'm going to use. They're aware of the magic that all stories connect through. I'm not explaining it well. Pick it up. I don't know what to tell you. It's a story about stories that have stories in them that are part of other stories that you see non-chronologically. None of it makes sense. there's parts of the books that are like journal entries, parts of the books that are like pieces of stories because the papers got rid. Like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It's a puzzle that's unsolvable. It's a really, really challenging read, and it's kind of a long book too. I totally recommend it though. If you can get through it, like at the end of it, you'll feel like you're ascending. You're like, oh, because you like have found the end of the book. That's all I have to say. Starless Sea, Erin Morgenstern. The next book I want to read is not a book that I necessarily loved, but I think that's okay. I'm still going to recommend it, and that is Leftand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is also a classic, maybe a modern classic, because I don't know. It's not that old of a book, but it's getting there. This is a challenging read because it's, again, one of those books you have to set your perspective aside, like with Bell Jar and Starless Sea. It's a classic. I wouldn't be surprised if you already know what it's about, but it's a sci-fi book about this future where planets are connected and they have like alliances and trade and stuff. And this representative from what we can assume is Earth, but it has like a different name, eons from now, goes to this planet where sex, like your biological genitalia, does not exist. Like gender roles, there's no patriarchy, there's no like gender or sex involved in anything socially, economically, structurally in their planet. And they kind of perceive people who have sex and gender as kind of like grotesque. They're like, ew, what do you mean? Like, you have those like sexual bits on the outside, because I won't spoil it, but they do like reproduce and conceive and stuff, the people without gender, but it's very different. Ursula K. Le Guin explains it in the book. The reason why it's challenging, don't come for me sci-fi lovers, but I struggle with it because I didn't like the plot. Yeah, I didn't like the plot. I loved the characters, most of them. I loved the characters, and I loved the like kind of philosophical outlook, the kind of comparison that you're forced to experience as the reader of the person who thinks it's weird to not have gender, which is like our perspective, right? We function in a patriarchal society kind of across the entire planet. And then for the other side to be grossed out that there is gender and like not understanding why that has anything to do with like how you should run your government or like your economy or society or your family dynamics, whatever. I loved that part. It's a hard read. There's lots of like random political conversations. It's almost like you're like a drone and you just get like dropped into these rooms randomly like across this genderless planet without any serious connective tissue or like congruity or path. So I don't know. I mean, Ursula K. Le Guin is an iconic like historic author at this point, right? Like she basically revolutionized sci-fi, and she's a woman who wrote for sci-fi, which was not really a thing like in the 70s or whenever her books kind of became big. So I have lots of respect for her. This is a difficult read because it doesn't make sense. But if you almost like read it like it's a philosophy book and it just happens to have this structure around it that is sci-fi dystopian, it's worth it, y'all. It's worth it. Okay, this is a little embarrassing because I haven't read this series in so long. I truly don't even remember like what happens. I remember a movie came out and it was so bad. They didn't even like bother to make a second or third movie. But I remember having such a hard time reading this and understanding what was happening when I was a kid. And that is The Fifth Wave by Rick Yancey. This is like a dystopian, maybe not dystopian, it's like a sci-fi YA trilogy. I have all 3 books. There's the other 2 there. And it's like alien invasion style. There's like global catastrophes with weather and stuff. And it's really, I remember really enjoying it. It's multiple POV. There's lots of like conversations about science and like astronomy and nuclear weapons and that kind of stuff. But I just remember like not... It was almost like too... annihilation for me when I was a kid, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was just too inexplicable, the, like, extraterrestrial elements of it. So I remember being a kid and, like, kind of skimming those parts, you know, I was just really looking for that romance section. I was really looking for, are they gonna survive? So I added this just because, like, nostalgia effect, and they're pretty long reads too. But this was a difficult, like, conceptual book to, like, series, the whole thing, right? To be able to get through and actually be able to, like, visualize everything, you know? This way. That's all I've got to say. I said I wouldn't talk about Toni Morrison again for a little while, but here I am. Here I am talking about Toni Morrison. I have, like, a huge video where I read her entire bibliography and talked about each of the books, ranked them, what I learned, a little bit of background information on Toni Morrison. I'll link it somewhere in this video. I worked so hard on it. I can't not talk about her books ever again. So the book I'm going to recommend is probably her most popular one, maybe second most popular one, and that is The Bluest Eye, this fabulous little Oprah Club edition. I'm recommending this for a challenge book because I encourage non-Black perspectives, non-Black people to read Black perspectives, especially ones as reputable and historic and amazing as Toni Morrison. She truly, like, changed everything with her writing and with her activism and her impact, like, on the understandings of kind of what goes on in Black communities behind closed doors. Challenge yourself to a perspective you do not live every day. Challenge yourself to better understand the people around you and understand that there's never a point where you know everything. There's never a point where you can fully understand a community you're not a part of, and continuation of growth is key to being, like, a true ally and a true activist. First of all. Second of all, it's a difficult read because the plot's really sad. These characters go through some really extreme situations that, again, may be, like, totally typical for the people and the communities in this book. I don't know. But it's really good. It's really heartfelt. It's really sad. You have some perspectives from, like, the kids. You have perspectives from adults. It's basically about this girl. She had to move out of her parents' house because of an accident that is revealed later in the book, so I won't spoil it. But she's boarding with this other family who takes in boarders for, like, money because they need money. And this girl has this desperate obsession with whiteness and white futures. All she wants is blue eyes, the bluest eye. So she, like, totally obsesses over Shirley Temple, and every time she looks, like, when you're in her perspective, she looks at other Black people, she's like, you're so ugly, like, you should be white, whatever. And just kind of her journey from the accident to going back to her parents after she leaves the boarding house. And you also get a look in on all the people kind of in her life. Really interesting, difficult, glorious read. It's a pretty short book too. I really recommend this one. The next book I'm recommending isn't necessarily a hard read, but for some reason for me, I'll get into it. Pinko by Min-Jin Lee. It was, like, one of my favorite reads in 2022 or whenever I read it. It's so, so good. It's just this, like, big chunk slice of life of this girl and her family and her troubles and her from 14 to, like, 80 or whatever. And the reason why I'm adding it to this list, again, not necessarily because it's, like, a difficult read, but my journey when I was reading this book took me a month to get through because for some reason I had to read every word so slowly, digest it, swallow it, chew it. Like, it took me forever to get through this book because I didn't want to miss a single freaking word. It's so delicious. It's so well crafted and written and complex, but humane. And ooh, you have to read this book, but you have to also know this isn't like a casual pickup. This is serious, serious, serious writing. It's about this girl. She believes she's not beautiful, but she's also not ugly. She's kind of just like this farmer's daughter or something, right? She lives in this tiny village, and this, like, rich, famous guy comes along, and he's like this 25-year-old. She's like a child, 13 or 14, and he seduces her and impregnates her. And she, like, doesn't understand what's going on. And her parents find this man who is like very religious and like so kind-hearted to marry her. And she marries him. They have a beautiful life together. She has more kids with her husband. He takes her to like the city, whatever. She doesn't live in the village anymore. And then the man from her past comes back. And she's like, I still love him, but I hate him. What do I do with this? And it's so much more than that. I kind of like painted it like it's a dark romance, but it's not. It's so much more than that. Please consider picking up this book. I don't want to say any more because I'm going to ruin it, but this book is like pure magic. It is like pure isolated magic. Just like, it's so good. Pachinko. The last book on this list is the last book I read in 2023. I finished it like 3 hours before midnight on the last day of the year. And what a weird book to end the year on. But that is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. I'm sure you've heard of this. This was hugely, widely controversial like 10 years ago or whatever when it came out. But it's loosely based on a true story. And I think, again, kind of like what I was saying with the Toni Morrison thing, it's so important to read other perspectives to gain true knowledge. This book leaves nothing unsaid. It is so honest and forward, and I think that's because it's loosely based off of the author's true lived experience. It's about this, what is she, 15, 16, 14 maybe? She's young. She's in high school, but she's young. And she is groomed in a relationship with like a 50-year-old man. Like not even like a cute 25-year-old. And it's modern times too, so there's no like historical like accuracies with the weird age gaps. He's genuinely 35 years older than her or something. And this totally destroys her psyche. You get dual perspective in the past and in the present. So she's like still struggling with what happened to her in the modern time. She like can't hold down a job, can't get a relationship. Her family's like she's a mess. And then in the past, you see her fall in love. Love isn't the right word, but become a victim of the grooming and presume that her understanding of what's going on is love and lust too. But this author leaves nothing unsaid. It's very graphic, sexual content galore, and also like depression and obsession wise, especially in the like modern time perspective. But it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. But it's beautiful in like that disgusting way, you know, where it's like, wow, your honesty, your integrity is so gorgeous. Thank you for sharing that with me. But also, holy shit, the things you went through. Like, it's almost inconceivable, but it's also totally not, because it happens every day. I really recommend this book to challenge your perspective, especially maybe if you're a man. Is that horrible to say? Especially maybe if you're a man, because these things happen every day. Whether it's a 16-year-old and a 25-year-old or a 14-year-old and a 50-year-old, it doesn't matter. It's still inappropriate, and it's even if it's legal, like whatever. In other countries or like in conservative states, whatever, it doesn't matter. You see how this relationship ruins this woman's life, and she paints it with every color on the palette. She holds nothing back in this book. Such a good, hard read. Okay, y'all. That is it. Those are I think it ended up being 10 books that I recommend to challenge you. There's so many different ways to challenge yourself with literature. This is all fiction. I could do a nonfiction one too, because I really like a lot of nonfiction, like memoirs and social studies and all that kind of stuff. But that is it for today. I encourage you to challenge yourself. It's good for you sometimes to like force yourself to slow down, force yourself to do something hard. Also, you don't have to if you don't want to, right? Like, not everything has to be hard or challenging, but sometimes it can be a really cool change. It can be really interesting and fun. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, do whatever you want to do. I'm not your mother, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.